My name is Julian. I'm 38 years old, and I'm about to tell you the story of how I died. Not in the literal sense, of course, though there were moments I wished for that kind of oblivion. No, I died to the man I thought I was. The man who built an empire on cunning and suspicion, only to have it all crumble under the weight of his own creation. I died to Julian Thorne, the ruthless CEO, and was reborn, though not without a brutal, soul-searing baptism by fire, into something else. It all started, as these things often do, with a woman. Her name was Sofia. She was, quite simply, breathtaking. Not in the superficial way one might admire a supermodel, though she possessed an undeniable elegance. Sofia was breathtaking in the way a sudden, unexpected sunrise over a mountain range steals your breath, a profound beauty that reached into the very core of you and demanded reverence. She had eyes that held the wisdom of ancient libraries, and the laugh that sounded like wind chimes on a summer's day. We met at a charity gala, a place I usually frequented out of obligation, a necessary evil for maintaining my public image. But when I saw her, gliding across the room in a gown that seemed spun from midnight and starlight, every cynical thought in my head evaporated. I pursued her with the same relentless drive I applied to my business ventures. It wasn't a chase, it was a campaign. Dinners at exclusive restaurants, weekend getaways to my private estate in the Hamptons, spontaneous trips to Paris. I laid my world at her feet. And she, surprisingly, accepted it all with a grace that never bordered on greed. She never asked for anything, never hinted at desires for more. She simply enjoyed it, enjoyed me, or so I thought. Our engagement was announced after a whirlwind 6 months. The tabloids, naturally, went wild. Tech titan Thorne to marry mystery woman. Is Sofia more than just a pretty face? The whispers, the insinuations, they started to burrow under my skin like insidious little insects. Was she truly different? Or was she just a more sophisticated version of all the others who had orbited my wealth, drawn to its gravitational pull? My past was littered with women who had professed undying love only to reveal their true colors when the topic of prenuptial agreements arose, or when a sudden downturn in the market sent ripples through my portfolio. I had become a master of preemptive strikes, always one step ahead, always protecting my empire, my legacy. And now, standing on the precipice of what felt like true happiness, that old, gnawing suspicion resurfaced, stronger than ever. I looked at Sofia, sleeping peacefully beside me in my sprawling penthouse apartment, the city lights painting patterns on her exquisite features. She was everything I thought I wanted. But was she everything I needed? Or was she merely captivated by the dazzling illusion of Julian Thorne, the billionaire? The thought festered, a poison ivy vine choking out the delicate bloom of trust. I concocted the plan in the dead of night, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and a perverse need for validation. It was elaborate, cruel, and in my twisted logic, utterly necessary. I would test her. I would strip away the facade of wealth, of power, of everything that made me Julian Thorne in the eyes of the world. I would become destitute, broken, a man with nothing but his name, a name that, for all intents and purposes, would be tarnished beyond recognition. The first step was to announce my financial ruin. It had to be convincing, spectacular even. I leveraged my connections in the financial press, feeding them carefully crafted leaks about a disastrous investment, a failed venture that had swallowed the entirety of my fortune. The headlines were brutal. Thorne's empire crumbles. Tech titan bankrupt. From riches to rags, the fall of Julian Thorne. The world reacted exactly as I anticipated. My friends vanished faster than shadows at noon. Business associates, who had once practically genuflected in my presence, suddenly developed selective amnesia when my calls came in. My phone, once a constant symphony of demands and opportunities, fell silent. It was a stark, chilling demonstration of how thinly veiled the loyalty of most people truly was. But the real test, the only test that mattered, was Sofia. I remember the day I told her. We were in my penthouse, the very symbol of the life I was pretending to lose. I had meticulously prepared my performance, slumped shoulders, a haunted look in my eyes, a tremor in my voice. I described the catastrophic losses, the liquidation of assets, the humiliating prospect of losing everything. I watched her, every fiber of my being tuned to her reaction, searching for the telltale flicker of disappointment, the subtle withdrawal, the dawning realization that her golden goose had in fact turned into a scrawny, plucked chicken. She listened, her face a mask of concern, her beautiful brow furrowed. When I finished, she didn't flinch. She didn't cry out in dismay. Instead, she simply walked over to me, took my face in her hands, and looked into my eyes. "Julian," she said, her voice soft but unwavering, "your money, it was never why I loved you." A flicker of hope ignited within me, quickly extinguished by the cynical voice in my head. Easy to say now, when the reality hasn't truly set in. "We'll get through this," she continued, her thumb stroking my cheek. "We'll figure it out. Together." I almost believed her. Almost. But the test had to be complete. The simulation had to run its course. "I've lost everything, Sofia," I said, my voice deliberately thick with despair. "The apartment, the cars, the company, it's all gone. I have nothing left to offer you." She smiled then, a small, sad smile that twisted something in my chest. "You have you, Julian. That's all I ever wanted." This was the critical juncture. This was where the real Julian Thorne, the ruthless manipulator, truly stepped out of the light and into the shadows of his own making. "I can't ask you to stay," I said, pulling away from her gentle touch. "I have no home, no future. I'd be dragging you down with me." Her eyes, those ancient, knowing eyes, seemed to pierce right through my carefully constructed facade. For a split second, I thought she saw me, saw the lie I was living. But then the moment passed, and her expression softened into one of profound sadness. "If that's what you truly believe," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "then I understand." And with those words, she turned and walked out of my life. Just like that. No dramatic scenes, no tears, no recriminations. Just a quiet acceptance that felt, ironically, more damning than any outburst. She left, and I was left alone in the vast, echoing silence of my penthouse, a king in a kingdom of shadows, utterly triumphant in my cruelty, and utterly miserable in my victory. The next phase of my plan was to disappear. I sold off a few minor assets, enough to create a small fund that would sustain my destitute existence. I rented a tiny, rundown apartment in a nondescript part of the city, far from the glittering towers I once inhabited. I changed my appearance, grew a beard, dressed in shabby clothes, cultivated a perpetually weary expression. Julian Thorne, the billionaire, was dead. Long live John Smith, the down-on-his-luck former executive. My days became a monotonous grind of feigned job interviews, always rejected, of course, and long solitary walks through parks, watching families, couples, ordinary people living ordinary lives. A life I once scorned now seemed impossibly distant, a foreign concept. The loneliness was a physical ache, a constant companion. I had orchestrated this isolation, but its reality was far more punishing than I had anticipated. One rainy afternoon, as I sat hunched on a park bench, pretending to read a newspaper while truly just staring blankly at the blurry world through the raindrops, a woman approached me. She was carrying a large, brightly colored umbrella, and her simple, practical coat couldn't entirely conceal the elegant posture beneath. As she drew closer, my heart, which I thought had become hardened beyond repair, did an odd little somersault. It was Sofia. Panic flared, cold and sharp. Has she discovered my deception? Was this the moment of reckoning? I instinctively hunched lower, pulling my baseball cap further down, trying to make myself invisible. But it was too late. She had seen me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. "Are you all right? You look lost." Her eyes, those beautiful, familiar eyes, held no hint of recognition, no accusation, only genuine concern. It was then that a horrifying thought struck me. She hadn't recognized me. She truly believed I was a stranger. My disguise was that good. Or perhaps her heart was that pure. I'm fine," I mumbled, my voice rough from disuse and nerves. "Just thinking." She sat down on the bench, a respectful distance from me, lowering her umbrella. "It's a good day for thinking, isn't it?" she said, gesturing to the rain-soaked park. "Cleanses the mind." I risked a glance at her. She was wearing minimal makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked ordinary and impossibly beautiful. The Sofia I had known was always impeccably dressed, every strand of hair in place, every accessory perfectly chosen. This Sofia was different, more approachable, more real. We talked for a while, a strange, stilted conversation between two strangers. She asked me about my troubles, and I spun a tale of woe, a struggling business, mounting debts, the crushing weight of failure. She listened with genuine empathy, occasionally offering a quiet word of encouragement. She didn't offer solutions, didn't pry for details. She simply offered solace. Before she left, she handed me a small, neatly folded business card. "I work at a community center," she said. "We help people get back on their feet. If you ever need someone to talk to or just a hot meal, please don't hesitate." I stared at the card in my hand long after she had disappeared, her bright umbrella a splash of color against the gray. The name on the card read, Sofia Rossi, Community Outreach Coordinator. Rossi, not Thorne. And beneath it, a humble address for a community center. A new twist, a new layer to my elaborate deception. She had changed her name. Had she, too, shed her identity? Was this her way of coping with my financial ruin? The thought brought a strange mix of guilt and perverse satisfaction. I had pushed her away, and she had reinvented herself, not with another rich man, but by devoting herself to helping others. It was noble, selfless, and it made my own actions feel even more despicable. I started visiting the community center, not for the services, of course, but for her. I would sit in the common room, nursing a lukewarm coffee, just to watch her. She was a whirlwind of compassionate energy, organizing food drives, counseling troubled individuals, her laughter occasionally echoing through the halls. She treated everyone with the same gentle respect, from the homeless man seeking shelter to the frantic single mother struggling to make ends meet. She was a beacon of light in a world I had designed to be bleak. We slowly, painstakingly built a new relationship. As John Smith, I confided in her, sharing my fabricated woes, allowing myself to be vulnerable in a way that I'd never been with anyone, not even the real Julian Thorne. She listened. She advised. She offered a comforting touch to my arm, a warm smile that reached into the darkest corners of my contrived misery. And somewhere along the line, without me even realizing it, my feigned feelings began to blur with genuine ones. The lines between John Smith and Julian Thorne, between the lie and the truth, started to vanish. I found myself falling in love with this new Sofia. Sofia Rossi, the selfless community worker, with an intensity that dwarfed my previous affections for Sofia Thorne, the elegant fiancée. This love was purer, forged not in the gilded cage of wealth, but in the crucible of shared vulnerability, of quiet understanding. I saw her strength, her unwavering kindness, her profound capacity for empathy, and the guilt, which had been a dull throb, became a searing agony. How could I possibly reveal my deception? How could I tell this incredible woman that everything we had built, every shared moment, every whispered confession had been founded on a lie? The thought alone was paralyzing. I had trapped myself in a cage of my own making, a prisoner of my own cruel game. Then came the day that shook my world even further. I was at the community center, helping Sofia organize a donation drive. We were laughing, our hands brushing as we sorted clothes, a spark igniting every time our fingers touched. It was a perfect, ordinary moment, filled with the kind of simple happiness I had once scoffed at. Suddenly, Sofia's phone rang. She excused herself, stepping into a quiet corner to answer. I tried not to eavesdrop, but her voice, usually calm, was laced with an unusual urgency. I caught snippets of the conversation. The board meeting. Thorne Corp. Hostile takeover bid. My blood ran cold. Thorne Corp. My company? A hostile takeover? But that was impossible. My company was supposedly bankrupt, dissolved. And even if it was, who would be discussing it with Sofia Rossi, a community outreach coordinator? When she returned, her face was pale, a worried frown creasing her brow. "Is everything all right?" I asked, feigning concern, my heart pounding in my chest. She hesitated, then sighed. "It's complicated. A friend is having some trouble at her company. Julian Thorne's old company, actually." She offered me a weak smile. "It seems, even when the man is supposedly gone, his ghost still causes trouble." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. She was hiding something. Something big. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in Sofia. She was more preoccupied, often lost in thought. Her phone calls were more frequent, her conversations hushed. And the name Thorne Corp kept surfacing in casual mentions, always followed by a quick change of subject. My carefully constructed reality began to unravel. My initial suspicion had been that she had merely accepted my ruin and moved on, only to stumble upon me in my impoverished state. But what if there was more to her transformation than met the eye? What if she was playing a game of her own? The idea, once terrifying, slowly transformed into a perverse sense of excitement. A worthy opponent, a mind as cunning as my own. It was a dangerous thought, but also an exhilarating one. I began to investigate, not as Julian Thorne, but as John Smith, a nobody with nothing to lose. I used my old contacts, cautiously, discreetly, posing as a freelance journalist researching the downfall of Thorne Corp. The information I unearthed was shocking, disorienting. Thorne Corp was not only not bankrupt, but it was thriving, more so than ever. A new, anonymous CEO had taken the reins, skillfully navigating the company through what had initially appeared to be a turbulent period, turning potential disaster into unprecedented growth. The new CEO was brilliant, strategic, and utterly elusive. No one knew their identity. The pieces started to click into place, forming a horrific yet undeniably brilliant picture. The community center, the friend with corporate troubles, and Sofia Rossi, it all pointed to one unbelievable conclusion. She hadn't just moved on. She had infiltrated. She had taken over my company, running it from the shadows, all while playing the role of the compassionate stranger, comforting the very man she was, in essence, outmaneuvering. The final confirmation came from an unexpected source. One evening, after a particularly draining day at the community center, Sofia invited me back to her apartment. It was a modest place, tastefully decorated,
nothing like the lavish penthouse I had once shared with her. As she went into the kitchen to make us tea, I noticed a laptop open on her small desk. My curiosity, now a raging inferno, got the better of me. I walked over, pretending to stretch, and glanced at the screen. What I saw made my blood run cold. It was a detailed financial report, open on a spreadsheet. The logo in the corner was unmistakable, and the name logged in as the user, S. Rossi. My heart hammered against my ribs, a chaotic drum solo of disbelief and a grudging admiration. She had been playing me. Not just along, but playing me. She knew. She had known all along. The woman who had offered me solace, who had listened to my fabricated...
I backed away from the laptop, my mind reeling. The teacup she handed me felt scalding hot, yet my hands were trembling with a sudden chill. The truth I had sought to uncover was far more complex, more devastating than I could have ever imagined. "You look pale, John," she said, her eyes, those beautiful, ancient eyes, observing me with an unnerving calm. "Are you feeling unwell?" I could only shake my head, unable to form words. The man I was pretending to be, John Smith, was disintegrating, and Julian Thorne, the ruthless CEO, was being dismantled piece by agonizing piece. The silence in the room stretched, thick and suffocating. I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that she knew I knew. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor, a tightening around her mouth, a flicker of something in her eyes that was no longer just warmth, but an undeniable edge. "Julian," she said, her voice dropping to a low, resonant tone, "we need to talk." The sound of my real name spoken in that quiet, deliberate way sent shivers down my spine. The game was over. The grand, cruel experiment had reached its inevitable, shattering conclusion. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just the kind stranger, not just the brilliant CEO, but the woman who had captivated me from the first moment, the woman I had loved, tested, betrayed, and then inexplicably fallen in love with all over again, in a new, more profound way. "You knew," I finally managed to whisper, my voice raw. She nodded, slowly, her gaze unwavering. "From the moment you told me you were financially ruined, Julian. The story, it had too many holes. You're a brilliant businessman. You don't make those kinds of mistakes. And the way you looked at me, searching for my reaction, it was a performance." "But why?" I asked, the desperation building in my chest. "Why play along? Why this?" I gestured vaguely around her modest apartment, at the very life she had constructed for her countergame. "Because I wanted to see how far you would go," she replied, her voice tinged with a sadness that cut me to the quick. "I wanted to see if the man I loved was truly capable of such cruelty. And then I wanted to see if there was anything left of the man I fell in love with under all that suspicion and fear. The company. When you disappeared, you left a vacuum. I knew Thorne Corp was too important to simply let dissolve. So I stepped in. I used my contacts, quietly took control, and kept it afloat. I thought perhaps when you saw the chaos you had caused, you would return. You never did. So you became Sofia Rossi," I finished, the realization dawning on me fully. "I needed a new identity just like you did, a way to operate without revealing myself, and the community center, it was a genuine calling, a way to do some good while also keeping an eye on the situation."
The silence returned, heavier this time, filled with the weight of unspoken truths and the echoes of shattered trust. I had sought to test her loyalty, only to discover the depth of her intelligence, her resilience, and her own profound sense of betrayal. I wanted to see if she loved me for my money. Instead, I had proven that I was incapable of trusting her or anyone. "I love you, Sofia," I said, the words finally tearing free, raw and unpolished. "I fell in love with you again as John Smith. I fell in love with Sofia Rossi, the woman who offered kindness to a stranger. It wasn't a lie, that part. It was real." She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine, and for a long moment I thought I saw a glimmer of hope, a flicker of the love that had once bound us. But then it was gone, replaced by profound weariness. "And how do I know that, Julian?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "How do I know that this isn't just another performance, another game you're playing to win back what you lost?" Her words were a dagger to my heart, because they were true. I had sown the seeds of doubt, and now I was reaping the bitter harvest. I had taught her to be suspicious, to question every word, every gesture. I had turned her into a reflection of my own jaded self. "I don't know how to prove it," I confessed, the full weight of my actions crushing me. "I've destroyed everything. I've destroyed us." "You did," she agreed, her voice devoid of anger, only sorrow. "You chose suspicion over trust. You chose to break what we had, to see if it would bend. And it did, Julian. It broke." Tears, hot and stinging, welled up in my eyes. I, Julian Thorne, the man who never cried, the man who prided himself on his unwavering composure, was weeping. Not for the loss of my company, not for the loss of my wealth, but for the devastating, irreparable loss of her trust. "What now?" I managed to ask, my voice choked with emotion. She stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the city lights, the same lights that had once illuminated my penthouse. "Now," she said, her back to me, "we both live with the consequences of our choices. You, with the knowledge that you destroyed something truly beautiful out of fear, and I, with the knowledge that the man I loved was capable of such a profound betrayal. Can we fix it?" I pleaded, rising to my feet, desperate to reach for her, to hold her, but sensing an invisible barrier between us. She turned then, her face a mask of sorrowful resignation. "Some things, Julian," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "once broken, can never truly be put back together the same way. The cracks will always show." And with those words, Sofia walked past me and out of her modest apartment. This time, there was no quiet acceptance in her departure. This time, there was a resolute finality, a door closing on a chapter of my life that I had tragically, painstakingly written into oblivion. I stood there, alone in the apartment of the woman who had outsmarted me, outplayed me, and ultimately shattered me. The empire I had built, the wealth I had accumulated, the power I had wielded, none of it mattered. It was all dust. All that remained was the hollow echo of my own name and the searing truth that in my relentless pursuit of the truth, I had become a lie, and in doing so, had lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. My name is Julian, and that is the story of how I died, not to the world, but to myself, and to the love I foolishly cast aside.